Hello, good afternoon or good morning, depending on your time zone. This is Robert Schoenberger, editor-in-chief of IndustryWeek, and welcome to Production Pulse, our biweekly web chat where we discuss what's going on in the manufacturing world. And this week we are talking safety. It is National Safety Month, and I believe it's also National Forklift Safety Day. Dave Blanchard is with us today, and he'll talk a little more about that. So welcome our guest today. We have Traci Purdum from Chemical Processing Magazine, and we have Dave Blanchard from EHS Today, our environmental health and safety brand. We're just going to talk a little bit about what's going on with industrial safety, who's doing well, who's not doing so well, and what we should all be keeping our eyes on. So welcome, everyone.
Thanks.
And Dave, let's start with you. Just if you could give us a bit of an overview from the EHS perspective, what's going on in industrial safety these days? What should we be paying attention to? What are the big stories?
All right, so I don't even know how to answer that question because that's all I do all day long is write about and read about and listen to people talking about safety or what's not safe. At the risk of overwhelming the audience with a bunch of numbers and statistics, I'm going to overwhelm the audience with a bunch of numbers and statistics. Just a couple things. So yeah, this is National Safety Month, but really what does that even mean? I mean, every day should be National Safety Day. And I'll tell you why. So according to the this is U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, every 96 minutes, so basically every hour and a half, somebody dies at work or due to a work-related injury. So that adds up to about 5,500 fatalities every year due to something happening at work. And you say, well, is that better or worse? Well, that's worse because that's a 6% increase over the previous year. So that's, you say, well, that's not good. So 5,500 more or less fatalities per year in the U.S. 8,000 workers die every single day worldwide. And that's mostly due to excessively long work hours, or another reason, and Traci's certainly more of an expert on this than I am, due to exposure to deadly chemicals or gases or things like that. So this is worldwide, 8,000 people every day. All right, so that's the situation that we deal with every day at EHS Today. It's like, well, how do we keep people safe? I'll just give you a little bit more on some of the reasons why people don't feel safe at work. There was a study done by, I'm looking at my notes, a company called Alert Media. They did a state of employee safety report, and 3/4 of all the people, well, these are employees, 3/4 of all employees say their companies, maybe they talk a good game, but they don't come through on their promises. If they say, well, our safety's number one, safety's job one. The job begins and ends with safety as our number one priority. Almost every company says something like that. And according to the employees, at least, most companies don't follow it up. They say it, but they don't do anything about it. 83% of employees say that they've experienced some kind of emergency at work in their careers. I'm going to give you a little bit more background. Just this is kind of the way we cover safety at EHS. So we don't just look at the number one reason people get hurt, not necessarily die, but number one reason people get hurt at work every year after year after year after year. I mean, it goes back forever probably. People fall down, people get hurt, people fall from heights, people aren't properly protected. Could be they fall off a building, they fall off a ladder, they trip. They fall down and they hurt themselves. So they could, sprain an ankle, or they could break their arm, or they could get killed if they fall from a great height. They fall on their heads and they don't have adequate head protection. So that's not a good situation. So June is National Safety Month. But what does that mean? The month of May was Mental Health Awareness Month, and I find in our coverage of safety, and the people on my staff, they see the same things, and we go to conferences all the time, and are talking to people and they say, well, what's causing this? Why is there so much burnout? I'll give you a couple other reasons why. Companies don't pay attention to their own employees. The number one workplace injury. Now you say, well, how do you define injury? Number one definition of injury is taking a day off. That would be one way you could define, are you injured? If you're not at work that day, what's the reason? More than half of the reasons that people give for not being at work are due to mental health injuries. So you say, well, what's a mental health injury? I mean, that's not just, you get something bang up against your head. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about stress. We're talking about anxiety. We're talking about burnout. We're talking about people just afraid to come to work. That could be they're victims of harassment, sexual harassment, gender harassment, prejudice, bias, all sorts of reasons, psychological reasons why someone doesn't feel safe at work. 1 million U.S. workers are absent every day due to some kind of worker stress or psychological problem.
So, Dave, circling back to something you said a minute ago, you were talking about when employees are surveyed about what their companies do about safety, that there's a sense that a lot of it's performative, that it's not real. We see that in a lot of areas. Lots of companies claim the safety is number one, or quality is number one, or our customers are number one. But there seems to be a real cynicism amongst employees, not just on the safety side, but on all of those leading things, because the number one thing for most businesses continues to be remaining profitable, remaining solvent, growing. We've seen this industry by industry with horrendous results. I mean, you think of the Boeing examples. This was a company that had for years said that number one thing was customer safety, and then you see these internal reports showing the opposite was true. Beyond just that as an observation, is there anything companies can do about that other than rededicate? Is this a perception problem and they need to fight with their employees? Or is this a resources issue where they are dedicating time and effort to things other than safety?
Well, I'm going to try to give you a quick answer because I don't want to dominate the whole conversation here, because I think Traci probably has a lot of interesting perspective from her industry that she covers. I will just say this. Companies are dedicated to being productive, right? If you have to get the work out, you have to get the products out, you have to get the products delivered, whatever your mandate is, you have to have a way of doing that. And the best way to ensure that you remain productive is to have workers. And if you're scaring your workers, or if you're not supporting your workers, or if your workers are getting hurt, if your job retention numbers are just they're dropping off the cliff because no one wants to work for you because they perceive you to not be taking their needs seriously, and you're not adequately protecting them. It could just be something simple like, the gloves that they issued to me today, they got holes in them. It's like, how am I supposed to go out to work with crummy equipment, crummy PPE? And that's an obvious one, but a less obvious one would just be, no one listens to me. I've got problems. Somebody is harassing me at work, and my company just says, just deal with it. My company says, we got to get work done here. So, ask me about that next week when we've got more time to deal with it. Meanwhile, you're stressed out of your mind because you can't get the job done because a lot of reasons. So to answer your question, should companies be paying more attention to their employees' mental health as well as their physical health if they want to remain productive and profitable? If you want to have a workforce that's engaged, yeah, we can talk about how that happens later, but I'll let you move on to another topic.
Yeah. So actually, Traci, I have some questions for you about the chemical industry specifically, but just on that sense of where companies are putting their priorities these days, do you feel, or have you heard from people in the chemical world about employees feeling unheard, or feeling that their companies are being a little performative when they talk about safety being their lead priority?
I think the chemical industry is a little bit different in the terms of there's just a lot more hazards when you walk into a chemical facility. So it has to be top of mind, and for the most part, it comes from management down. So they do walk the walk. But obviously, there's hazardous, catastrophes that happen all the time. So obviously, we're not learning from those lessons from past incidents. So it's an ongoing battle to make sure that safety is top of mind to help the bottom line. And I think that people realize being safe and offering a safe workplace for their employees will benefit all around. But getting the message across sometimes is difficult. Operator training sometimes just falls back on the job training, and you've got operators that are training their new workers and they don't know how to teach, and they know how to be safe on their own, but they don't know how to express that to somebody else. So things that are natural to them that they understand, oh, don't do that because this will happen, they don't express that to some of the new folks coming in. And so that's where you have your hazards, things that can happen. So I think that it's just a whole realm of making sure. Dave mentioned the psychological safety, being able to say something if you see something and not feel like you're going to be um, your career is not going to be impacted by you saying something. You need to have that psychological safety. You need to be able to feel comfortable where you're at and understand things. So I think there's a whole bunch of things happening all at once that need to make sure that the perfect storm doesn't happen. And that's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question there, Robert.
No, that's great. But moving on to the chemical world specifically, there's been a lot of talk recently, even some discussion of regulations and new legislation around some chemical safety, as worker safety in chemical facilities. Vinyl chloride specifically. After that train derailment last year in East Palestine, Ohio, there was discussion of possibly tightening regulations on that. Can you give us an overview on what you're seeing?
Well, obviously, the EPA has been very busy with regulations in their Toxic Substance Control Act. Many chemicals are on that list. And as you mentioned, vinyl chloride and chloropene is also there, ethylene oxide, benzene, ethylene dichloride. All of these are the EPA is requiring fence line monitoring. So with chemical facilities, you have to worry about the inside and the outside, and that involves your communities as well. So that's big things happening there. I think that they're just preparing for November's results, trying to push as much as they can through with these types of regulations. And so with these fence line monitoring, they really want to make sure that the community is safe as well. And fence line monitoring kind of has a 6 mile radius around facilities that are known to have hazardous emissions come out. So they want you to constantly monitor that. Obviously, EPA and industry butt heads a lot, and it's that checks and balances, which is very beneficial. Because you don't want the EPA overstepping, you don't want industry overstepping their bounds. So safety is the winner here when we have these types of things. But the conversation's happening. Some folks down in Louisiana in the chemical corridor, sometimes called Cancer Alley, feel that they're being targeted unfairly. There's 200 plus facilities that are being mandated to get their fence line monitoring up in a 90-day period, and other companies with more hazardous chemicals coming out of there have a 2-year window. So there's this sense of it's not fair. However, it can go to the he said, she said, because there have been studies down in that chemical corridor where fence line monitoring has happened, and they have these remote vehicles that go out and can monitor the air quality. And the EPA bases the air quality on what has been delivered to them by industry, and then they find out on third-party testing that that's not always the case. So I think that there is some good work happening by the EPA to make sure that what is being said is true. And then industry, obviously, everything in the world is made of chemicals, so there is a need for these types of chemicals. So there has to be that balance, but at the bottom line of everything, it does have to be safety.
That's great. Something that we've discussed often at IW is the need for more employees, the need for fresh workers, the difficulty in recruiting, hiring people. I'd like to hear from both of you, but let's start with you, Dave. On how does that affect safety? Traci already mentioned a little bit with new people coming into the plant, but how hard is it to recruit a senior safety person, a trainer, or something along those lines? And if you have an inexperienced workforce, how much more of a safety risk are they than a seasoned one?
Well, the number one, I should stop saying absolutes, a frequent reason for people getting hurt on the job is they're just not trained in a certain situation. And what this comes down to oftentimes is temporary workers or new workers, somebody who just joins the job, that they're being trained on. We're talking that, this week was also National Forklift Safety Day was observed today. There's a lot of safety events and days that are commemorated, which basically means we're going to focus on something today, but really we should be focusing on it every day. Anyways, the problem is you don't want to put somebody in harm's way who's not properly trained. And with so many companies finding it difficult to find good workers to begin with and training them, if they're not actually trained on dangerous equipment and they're dangerous situations in construction or in manufacturing, you're going to have some problems. So I would say that there are a lot of good potential solutions for this. We've done some articles recently in EHS Today on some of the new types of training, sort of situational devices like virtual reality, where you take somebody and you kind of simulate that they're in a really dangerous situation. They're obviously not, but they kind of are feeling like they are, and say, well, how do you react? How do you react when you seem to be falling, or you're in a forklift and it's like tipping over? And putting them in situations where they can at least get that awareness of what their job is going to be all about. It's tough. It's tough finding people in any kind of a manufacturing or warehousing situation to begin with, and then to train them to keep them safer. You've got to be diligent. I guess that is the number one lesson to be learned here. Is you can't just have safety or have training being a one-off. You can't say, well, we brought you on your orientation day and we taught you how to use this equipment. Now, go use it. You got to have constant monitoring and constant training. It can't just be a one-off sort of thing.
Yeah, we've written a lot about AR and VR training over the past year or so, and it seems to be getting a real foothold in the sense that you can share a lot of information with employees, especially these newer AR systems where they can point their phone at a device and see where they're supposed to do what to it. In the safety realm, it still seems that might be a little slower than on the job or some sort of in-person training where you're really facing those sorts of situations. Traci, your take is the influx of new people causing a more dangerous workplace, or the lack of available safety trainers?
Well, I think Dave brought up the point of the permit to work. So if you've got contractors coming into your facility, especially chemical facilities, there's so much going on in there that is dangerous. And if you don't have a good permit to work initiative in place, where that is training an outside contractor of the things to be aware of, so they have clearance. So if you have operators working in a section and then maintenance needs to come in, they need to give that permit to work to those maintenance workers. They need to hand off and say, okay, you have to watch out for this. You have to watch out for that. That's going to kill you. So be aware of that. And sometimes those permit to work handoffs don't happen, and then that's when disaster strikes. Tata Chemicals in Europe just was fined $1 million because they had a worker come in. He was part of a scaffolding team putting in scaffolding in a chemical facility, and he stepped in a trough that had milk of lime in it, and it caused thermal burns and physical burns, and was taken to the hospital. And then less than a month later, he had a hemorrhage in his foot and ended up dying from that accident. That was in 2016. Just now, they were found guilty of that worker's death because they did not have permit to work in place. That team of scaffolders came in and did not understand what was happening, what happens in a chemical facility. They did not understand that walking over that trough it's live and it's in motion. And so by stepping in it, it's hotter than Hades, and B, it's chemicals. So by him not understanding that, by the facility not making certain that people coming in, contractors coming in, understand the safety concerns, that's where the problems lie. And if they're doing that with their contractors, how well is the workforce trained? And that's where you have to make sure the management of change, anything that changes within your facility, you brought up Boeing. That's what happened with Boeing. They put in those new engines and didn't train their pilots. And so, within the chemical industry, we look to the aviation industry, we look to the medical industry to find those lessons learned. And that was a big failure on Boeing's part. They said, no, it's the same for those pilots in there. They don't need the training. And come to find out they did, because when they went and ascended, their engines put them down into a spiral, and they didn't know what was going on. And that's really where those catastrophic plane crashes occurred, because of the management of change was not managed correctly.
Last year, I was really honored to be able to attend the EHS Today's Safety Leadership Conference, and someone told just a heart-wrenching story over there about the things you don't think about. It was just someone cleaning up in a restaurant, mixing the wrong 2 or 3 chemicals together, releasing some chlorine gas, and killing himself, and seriously injuring several other people in the restaurant. We live in a dangerous world, and if we're not constantly aware of that, that we're really putting ourselves and others at risk. So it's a good idea to take our time every now and then to remind ourselves that safety really should be job number one. People should go to work, do their jobs, and go home safely to their families every night. And it's a shame that doesn't happen more often.
Absolutely. And bringing up, the losing the knowledge of the older workers going out, and they understand those things, they know not to mix A and B together. And the new folks coming in, the older folks are not shy about saying that the workforce coming in from college is not well trained on, in the physical plant. They know theory and they know book stuff, but they don't know that pump doesn't sound right. You better watch out. And that's something that you have to learn how to teach the new folks coming in. You can't just say, oh, everybody knows that. No, they don't.
There was a mantra that is popular in safety circles, has been for years. It says, we want you to go home in the same condition that you were when you arrived. Now they're kind of, I'm not saying a lot of people are doing this, but some are. And I hear this more recently at conferences now. We want you to go home better than when you arrived. In other words, we want you to have learned something about, not only about your job, but about how to take yourself more seriously, how to be safer, not just at work, but in your entire life. So that if you can learn something better while you're at work, and you go home actually, smarter, maybe not physically, you're not out getting a good workout every day if you're sitting at a desk, but you've learned something about your employees and about how you have to all be smart and observant and aware. And that's where the best companies, the safest companies excel at, is they engage their workforce. They don't just talk. Their managers know their employees. They know what their issues are. They know what they're going through. They know how to protect them and how to reach them at a gut level, saying, hey, we know that you are in harm's way here in certain situations. We are going to do everything we can to protect you. We're going to give you the right equipment. We're going to give you the right training, but you have to be careful. You can't just assume that we're doing this all and that you can just go out there and, you don't focus for a minute, and that's when bad things happen. So you got to stay focused.
I always lecture my husband on inherently safer design, and Trevor Kletz is a huge. He was the guru on process safety, and he said if you don't have it, it doesn't leak. The man lived in a 1-story home, so he wouldn't fall downstairs. And I tell my husband, when he's filling the dishwasher and he puts those knives up with points in the thing, I yell at him and I turn it upside down. And I said, this is inherently safer design. And the next time you go in there and if you stab yourself, you're going to think of me and go, oh, yes, she's right.
Well, on that, thank you both for your time today, Traci and Dave. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you for the audience for joining us today. And have a great afternoon. And if you really need help, Traci can come and show you how to load your dishwasher sometime. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks a lot.